Hey folks, I'm not sure really how conversation is going to go. I just felt like I needed to get out some thoughts and try to talk things through a little bit. Um, I'm going to start back about 2.5 years ago. I started having serious conversations with a lady about wanting to potentially get into a relationship and see where that went. About 6 months into that conversation, the conversation turned to her coming down to Arizona to um, potentially see if uh, time in person could make like that if our relationship had any form of actual shot uh, by her moving in for a couple of months to really test things out and see if and where the relationship may end up going. Um, she wasn't in a great spot at the time mentally and emotionally, but I know myself well enough to know that I'm capable enough to be able to support that and try to help someone better themselves, which in my estimation is a great attribute and can be exceedingly helpful. Um, for the first, she ended up coming down in about July and was down here for roughly 2.5 months. During that time frame, things went pretty great until near the end when I was told that she was moving back. Once she moved back, or once that conversation came up, things got a little bit abrasive due to um, previous conversations we had had where she had indicated that that was not going to be the case. And I had kind of looked at the entire conversation holistically and the relationship as a trial run for a much longer, potential, much longer term mate. Um, Ended up end of October or end of August, early September. Ended up driving her back to where she's from. Um, it was the first time in my entire life where I had a drive over probably 6 hours where no words were spoken at all. Um, well, not no, but very very minimal. We probably said 500 words the entire drive. The entire drive was over 24 hours. Um, So it was rough to say the least. We got back up to Washington, and I had told her that if this was the direction she was going to go, and I had told her this a few times prior, that if she was going back to Washington and back to the same situations, first off, let's take a pause. Say hello to Chica, um, my beautiful little tripod Rottweiler. She's probably going to be in and out of frame. Um, so we were driving back and we'd gotten back up to Washington, and I had said something to the effect of, uh, "This is it. This is going to be goodbye." I'm a very all-in type person, and that had been expressed. And she'd known me for many years and knew exactly who and what I was looking for, who I am, and what I was looking for. Um, and had told me on many occasions that she understood like how any form of a relationship with me would end up uh, probably playing out if like the minimum bars are not met. I'm the type of person that when with being all in that it either works and I'm willing to fight for it and bend over backwards in all reality, which is probably not a healthy thing looking back on it now. It's just a part of who I am. But um, she ended up driving back. We ended up driving back, and she had made her decision at that point that she needed to return to Washington. Um, we sat in the car when she was dropping me off because we were driving her car, and we rehashed that same conversation. And I'm like, hey, just so you know, I understand that you've made your decision. That's fine. My decision on this is um, because of your decision, I'm done. Um, you and I will no longer be friends. We won't talk anymore. I will basically, we will be persona non grata. Um, that ended up lasting about 3 weeks. And during that time frame, I had done a decent amount of introspection on a couple of things. One of which was the stance that I was taking fair? Um, was it justified in that context? As well as, was I really truly willing to let go of the relationship, or was I willing to try to push through it and see where it ended up going after that? Um, as it turns out, in retrospect, I don't regret the decision I made, um, but it definitely weakened my position in our relationship and friendship. And I could kind of tell after that that a little bit of like, looking back, obviously, as hindsight's 2020, that it probably lost me a little bit of respect to kind of go back on that decision. And again, knowing the information I know now, I probably would have done it a little bit differently, but second guessing that is not really something I'm interested in doing. I made the decision I made at the time with the information I had, and that's just kind of how that plays. Um, so as I was saying, after about 3 weeks, I reached back out and we started talking again. Um, Started trying to see how things would play out again with distance. We ended up doing that for, let's see here, that was been September of 2020, I think. Yeah, that would be about the right time frame. So call it October after the 3 week point. That ended up going about a year and a half. And over time, there were decisions that she had made about living conditions and keeping in contact with her ex in ways that her and I had discussed were not exceedingly healthy, or were not healthy in general, um, and put a very dark light, if you will, on any potential future relationship. So my asks became a little bit more stern. And in retrospect, again, I think with the information I had, I don't regret that. It was more of a, hey, these are the things I need. And if this relationship is something you want to see, if it goes anywhere, and see if it moves to fruition and becomes something that at the time her and I both wanted, uh, or at least she claimed she wanted. I don't know, right? Actions speak louder than words at the end of the day. The only thing I was asking for was for her to move down. Now, obviously, that's not a small ask. That's just um, what it what the relationship would have required to have gone any form of real distance, right? To give any real shot to it. Um, Over the next year and a half, as I said, things continued to deteriorate, and eventually communication pretty much fully broke down. About a month ago now, um, it completely died off. She had made the decision to completely go dark, which, fair enough. I don't fault her for that at all. And actually, in all honesty, I'm actually grateful for it, because um, it allowed me to start to close off and rebuild, right? Close off that portion of my life and start actually looking forward in other aspects. One of the things I realized after about the first 2 weeks was I had been so focused the last 2 years on helping her grow and helping her try to understand her demons, right? Not trying to like guide it, but trying to be there as a support mechanism. And I was doing that so much that I had forgotten and failed, I suppose is the right word, to, what's the right phrase here? I had forgotten and failed to continue to address and grow myself to the extent at which I normally do. So I wish, going back, that I had maintained that portion. But over the last month, I've been refinding that part of myself and have been introspecting a little bit more on what I want, how I'm going about attaining it, and trying to go that route. Obviously, none of that is simple. None of that is, like, actually, most of that's quite complex to try to break through. But at the end of the day, I kind of realized that I had essentially thrown away that amount of time, which is not good, obviously. Um, and I had started about, call it 3 weeks back, so about a week into the whole uh, figuring things out and really re-looking at the situation with a more objective eye, right? Not fully objective, but more objective. I started realizing that, uh, or not realizing, no, I had started questioning whether or not I would have to fully give up on the one thing I've wanted for, oh God, probably 2 decades, maybe even more, which is a family, and finally accept that maybe there's a maybe there's a path in my life that that's not a thing, right? Where I won't actually be able to attain that. And then if it comes at some point, that'd be great, but under the same banner, stopping trying to actually attain it, stopping myself from, or at least trying to tone back going into relationships with women and utilizing that for the bar of whether or not I actually want to put forth a ton of effort into a relationship. Um, then this last week, it kind of hit me that uh, there's hope in the future, which I hadn't felt for a while. I've been going through this dating service recently. It's kind of like an online blind date matchmaker service, and like every date I'd had four, I think, up until like last week, week before, and all of them were just complete busts. Like just no, not even close. Um, but then this last week, I had a date with a lady that kind of gave that hope back, and I'm still trying to figure out like how to navigate that a little bit. But it seems to me that it's helped me start to move on a little bit. I'm a very like music for me tends to cut pretty deep. And depending on the music I'm listening to has a lot to do with what mood I'm in. So if I'm listening to like emotional music, I feel that a lot, like very deep, at least certain types of it. And then like upbeat music, same thing. And it just each type of music I listen to kind of plays a role in um, helping drive my emotion, not so well, helping reflect my emotion, so that I can better understand and process it. Um, but one of the things I realized tonight, which is part of the reason I'm doing this video, is with that hope of the potential for more, that the music I used to listen to with my ex doesn't hit as hard anymore, right? I'm starting to almost forget the musical impact for it. So like songs that I would listen to with her, I could listen to now, or even songs that she shared with me, I can listen to now, at least tonight. We'll see what the future holds, but at least for tonight, I can listen to them, and it's not immediate sadness in the form of regret and like the death of something great, which is a major step forward. But I started thinking on hope a little bit, and hope is an amazing tool for us people. It can give you that drive to continue forward, but it's also a double-edged sword. With that hope comes the continued realization, at least for me, that it can be lost. And when it is, it can kind of cut away a lot of the stability that you built around it. So I suppose the lesson here is, and again, still fleshing this out, but the lesson I think that's here is that hope is good to push forward, but don't let it, or don't utilize it to build stability off of. You need to take that hope as almost an energy source to drive self-introspection and learning to build your own building blocks and your own stability for what truly is you. And that's a very difficult and fine line to walk, but it's an important one, I think. We'll see how things play out in the future, but I believe at this point I've gotten to the point where I'm over the worst of it, and now it's continuing from there and trying to. I think the next goal that I'm hoping to attain is that I can look at the relationship and what actions I took during it and seriously contemplate and introspect on trying to determine, like, were there things in that relationship that I shouldn't have done? Should I have, when I drove back in September of 2020 and I had said goodbye at that time, should I have just closed the door and just walked away? Um, a part of me is seriously considering that that would have been the right decision to make, because there's a big difference in my thoughts anyway, at least to this point, between regretting a decision and being able to look back on it and realize, hey, in the moment, probably a good decision, because of all the things I've been able to learn from it about myself, right? But if I were to do it again, I don't think I would. I think I probably would have closed that door at that point, no matter how much it hurt and broke me for a while. I think it would have been the right decision, from both a respect from her standpoint as well as just a self-respect standpoint, more importantly, right? Because as a guy specifically, I don't know how it is for chicks, but as a guy, like, when you set that line and you're like, hey, this is it, this is my point. This is, if you make this action, these are the consequences that are going to come from it. Um, Standing on that and truly owning it and living with it, right, and being actually dedicated to it is a significant part of being solid in who you are and trying to actually maintain that level of self-respect for, this is what I need, like, truly what I need from this person. And if they're not willing to give it to you, or they're not able to give it to you for any number of reasons, that's acceptable and that's entirely understandable. No shame in that, no fault in that. But it is what it is, and you need to truly own that, accept it, and move forward. That's a very hard lesson to learn, and it's even harder of a lesson to put into practice, because you're so invested in relationships, especially when you can see yourself with them long term. You can see a family. You can see growing old with them even. That's an incredibly difficult standard to hold, but it's a very important standard. So to anyone watching this, my recommendation would be, find where you're willing to go to, find that line, and when you reach it, stand on it. Don't waver. It's going to suck. It's going to hurt. It's going to be brutal in so many facets of your life. But I promise you, it will be significantly better for you in the long run. As for me, right, as I mentioned earlier, it genuinely cost me, all things said and done, about a year and a half of self-growth. Um, I'm hopeful that I can make that up by reevaluating everything that took place during that time and trying to put it, like, learn from it, introspect on it, put it into practice, and then better myself moving forward. But I strongly suspect, and of course this is entirely conjecture, I strongly suspect that if I had owned and stood on that principle of, these are my needs, meet them or don't, I would have come to those same conclusions anyway, because I would have realized, hey, that self-respect is still there, instead of having to tear it all down and figure it out. All this kind of comes into an analogy I like to use that I've only told to a few people, but um, there's a, what's the right way to explain this? Picture a skyscraper that you're building, okay? Um, if you, throughout most of your life, as you grow and you learn and and improve as a person. And sometimes like fall backwards, right? Because every time, like, that's a part of learning and growing. Um, you're essentially building a skyscraper. Okay, and the say you've gotten your floors to like you're building 51 through 55, right? Because you don't generally build just one floor at a time, right? There's different levels of construction, but you've gotten the first like 50 floors set up. Um, Floors 45 to 50 are generally reserved for like close family and your closest your closest friends, like those people that if you were in the absolute shit that you would pick up the phone, call or text, and they would be there no matter what if you needed them, right? They're the people that you can sit down and have a conversation with about like the stuff that's like really hitting you, and actually have a real conversation without judgment, and where they simply just want the best for you. um, Floors 35 to 45, 20 to, or 30 to 45 probably are your like acquaintances or your closer friends that don't quite match up to that bar for the 35 to 40, or sorry, 45 to 50 level. And those are the people that like you're happy to be around, you enjoy spending time with, etc. But if you're really in it, you're not going to call them, right? You're not going to like utilize them as a support structure to any real degree. And then anything under that 30th floor is your acquaintances. Those are people you meet at work. Those are just like people you hang out with from time to time, that type of folks. Um, that's about generally how I look at it from a personal perspective. And then when you're building a relationship, you're not just including them in yours. You are doing that to some extent, right? And depending on the depth of that relationship, they can get into the like floors 51 and 52, that are still under construction. But if you're at least at the start, right, you don't want them in the other floors, right? The 53 through 55, the ones that are like bare structure. Um, Maybe over time as the relationship progresses over the years, etc. Um, but when you're building that relationship with someone else or someone new, you're essentially the two of you are coming together to start your own skyscraper. Okay, and that means you're building it from the ground up. Obviously, there's a lot of different things that need to be taken into consideration because there's two people now instead of one, but you're essentially building up two like floors on top of your skyscraper and theirs to kind of merge into a singular structure above, right? While you're still building on yours and they're still building on theirs, irrespective of that new skyscraper that's coming up. One of the things that I failed to realize and failed to put into practice specifically is I didn't make that distinction well enough in my own head, and my understanding at the time of what would happen if I had removed her, right? If I had fully closed that door and moved on, that I would have lost and had to like demolish a decent amount of the floors that she was pretty well embedded in. In reality, that's not the case, right? Think of it like the floors that person that you're trying to build off of yours, that you're essentially just needing to redecorate, right? Because you're not really changing the structure of the floors. You're more reorganizing and like removing some things and adding in new furniture, etc. Right? Kind of like you would do for a house. Um, I didn't realize that. I think a part of me realized it, but I definitely didn't put it into practice in understanding. And I think that kind of plays into that sunken cost fallacy where it's like, okay, what am I really giving up by letting this go? Um, and I had dramatically overestimated that because I was so invested. So I think the lesson here for anyone watching this is that when you when you close that door on a relationship with someone and you're like, "Hey, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Like this isn't something that I can continue with." Try to realize, as difficult as it is, that the things you're actually like giving up, like you're not giving up a part of yourself. as much as you're realigning the parts of yourself that were so integrated with them. And if you're wise and smart, you'll take the lessons from that you find, and those are going to be different from every relationship and every person, but the lessons you find, you can utilize those to improve and really solidify more, not fully but more, the the parts of your own skyscraper, and utilize it to build a more home, a more, yeah, more like you part to those floors, which is, if done correctly, can be a great thing. So I just, there's not really any calls here. It just, try to remember, if you're coming out of a relationship or you're seriously considering that, hey, maybe this isn't healthy for me, maybe what's really needed here is that separation and closure, that you don't actually lose you. You can still you can actually gain a lot from doing that. As much as it hurts, as much as it absolutely sucks, and trust me, if you're invested in them, it's going to suck. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If it doesn't, you're not truly dealing with it. You're just closing yourself off completely emotionally, and eventually, and I promise you this, eventually you will come across that and you will have to deal with it. And the longer you wait, the worse it's going to get. That's just the nature of emotional impact. The more you bury it, and I've done this many, many times throughout the years, so I'm very familiar with this. The more you bury it and the longer it sits, it just festers underneath and it just grows. And eventually, when you try to deal with it, it's going to be absolutely savagely brutal. So try to remember that you are not the totality of the relationship that you're in, and it does not fully define you. It partially defines you, but it does not fully define you, and you can continue and utilize it as a learning experience to better yourself going forward.